9 years. 9 years of broken sleep, working double shifts, eating cold leftovers on bus rides, and counting pennies like prayers. I was 25 when it began, and 34 when it finally happened. But back then, I believed every sacrifice was worth it. The house wasn't just wood and brick. It was the last piece of my childhood that hadn't crumbled. I still remembered being 13, standing in the doorway while men in suits waved papers at my parents. The word foreclosure hit me harder than any slap. I begged them to fix it, begged them to keep the roof over our heads. My father had sneered, "If you care so much, you pay for it." And so I did. I took jobs no one else wanted, cleaning greasy kitchens after midnight, scrubbing toilets in offices where people didn't bother to look me in the eye, bagging groceries until my back ached. In winter, I wore the same torn coat year after year because the money had to go toward the debt. Every month, I carried the payment slip like a fragile relic, handing it over at the bank with shaking hands. Please subscribe to our channel and tell us in comments from where are you watching this video. My parents, they lived like the world owed them everything. My mother still bought perfume that cost more than my entire week's groceries. My father gambled away nights in smoky bars, coming home with excuses and bitterness. And Lindsay, my golden sister, was always draped in something new. A necklace, a designer bag, a vacation photo from Cancun. They praised her beauty, her charm, her ability to deserve nice things. And me? I was the mule, the one who shouldered the burden so their image never cracked. Still, I kept telling myself it was worth it, that maybe one day when the debt was finally gone, they'd look at me differently. Maybe Mom would say, "You saved us." Maybe Dad would pat my shoulder and admit, "We couldn't have done it without you." 9 years of my life disappeared into that hope. But hope is a dangerous thing in a toxic family. The night it happened was so ordinary it almost fooled me. I'd just come home from a grueling shift at the diner, uniform still smelling like burnt coffee. The house was quiet, unusually so, but I chalked it up to everyone being asleep. I sat at the kitchen table, pulled out my checkbook, and made the final payment entry. 9 years of blood and sweat, and at last, the house was free. My chest ached with something close to pride. I even let myself dream that tomorrow might be different. Maybe they'd cook dinner for me. Maybe they'd say thank you. Maybe they'd love me the way I had begged them to for years. But morning shattered that fantasy like glass. The front door was wide open when I woke up. The living room looked stripped, empty in a way that made my stomach turn. Drawers left ajar, photos missing from frames. Their cars were gone. My mother's perfume bottles no longer lined the bathroom shelf. Lindsay's clothes were missing from the closet. I stumbled into the kitchen and found it, a single folded note on the counter. 4 words in my father's handwriting. We sold the house. Sold it. After 9 years of my life poured into saving it, they had sold it overnight and vanished. I crumpled the paper in my hand, my chest heaving, rage, betrayal, humiliation, they all tangled until I couldn't breathe. I ran outside barefoot, scanning the street, hoping it was a nightmare. But the neighbors were already talking, their eyes sliding away from mine, whispers curling in the air like smoke. She worked for that house, didn't she? And did they just left? Monsters. I sank onto the curb, my palms digging into the pavement. 9 years gone. My 20s gone. My trust obliterated. But as the sun rose higher, burning against my skin, a new thought crystallized. They thought they had taken everything from me. They thought they had erased me. But they had forgotten one thing. I was the one who had kept this house alive for 9 years. And if they thought betrayal would bury me, they hadn't yet seen what 9 years of fury could do. The paper crumpled in my fist as I sat on the curb, the words "we sold the house" burning into me like acid. My chest heaved with ragged breaths, my legs numb, my hands trembling, not from weakness, but from something far heavier. Rage. For hours I just sat there, Neighbors peeked from curtains, whispering, but none dared to come closer. They'd watched me for 9 years, trudging to work in uniforms that smelled like grease and bleach, watched me drag my exhausted body home, while my parents flaunted their shiny cars and Lindsay paraded her new bags. They knew the truth, but never said a word. Now they had the satisfaction of gossip. "Did you hear? She saved the house and they sold it." I didn't even cry. My eyes stung but stayed dry, because deep down, I knew tears were useless. They'd fed on my pain for years. I wouldn't give them one more drop. By afternoon, I forced myself to move. I went inside, scanning the emptiness like a crime scene. Every trace of them was gone. Perfume bottles, Lindsay's makeup drawer, even the ridiculous glass rooster Mom claimed was family heritage. They hadn't just left. They'd scrubbed themselves clean of me. I found nothing but the silence of walls I had bled for. And then, something strange. An envelope tucked under the phone stand, maybe forgotten in their rush. My hands shook as I tore it open. Inside, the official sale agreement. Their signatures were bold, smug strokes at the bottom. The buyer's name was printed clearly, some out-of-town investor. And the payment transfer date? The day before I made the final payment. They had planned it all. They let me finish paying the last installment, and the very next morning they sold it out from under me. My stomach lurched, bile rising. For 9 years I had been nothing more than their mule. They had watched me break myself to keep this roof, only to snatch it away the moment I proved them wrong. I should have collapsed, but instead, something inside me cracked wide open. The girl who had worked, begged, and hoped was gone. What was left was sharper, harder. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table, empty now except for my checkbook and the faded payment stubs I'd kept for 9 years. One by one, I laid them out, a paper trail of every sacrifice, proof. For days, I traced their trail. They hadn't gone far, not yet. They were in a rented condo downtown, living it up with the money I had earned. I saw Lindsay post on social media, cocktails on the balcony, her new diamond bracelet glinting under city lights. Mom and Dad in matching robes, holding champagne. They didn't block me. They didn't even think I mattered enough to hide it. To them, I was nothing. But they were wrong. I started quietly, calling in favors from people who still respected me, the grocer whose shelves I stocked at night, the janitor whose shifts I covered, the old librarian who watched me fall asleep over debt guides. They all knew the truth of who paid for what. And they were angry too. I gathered documents, testimonies, even photos of my parents' spending habits while I carried the debt. I didn't just want to prove what they'd done. I wanted to strip them of the one thing they worshipped more than money, their spotless image. Meanwhile, I played the part they expected. I went back to work, silent and tired, letting them believe I was broken. Lindsay even called once, her voice smug. "Tough break, sis. Maybe next time you won't waste your life on a house you couldn't keep." I bit my tongue, let her laugh, and hung up. But inside, the storm was building. Weeks turned into months. I moved into a tiny apartment, just big enough for me and the notebooks I filled with plans. I worked my shifts, nodded politely, and waited. My parents' arrogance grew with each passing day. They flaunted their new life to anyone who would watch. And then, the opportunity appeared. A charity gala. My parents had been invited to speak about family resilience and building a future. They bragged about it online, posing in outfits bought with money stolen from me. It was perfect. I didn't want them in jail. I didn't want them penniless. That would be too easy. No, I wanted them exposed. I wanted every person whose approval they craved to see them for what they were. I wanted them to taste the humiliation they had fed me for 25 years, chew on it until it rotted them from the inside. And as I packed the folder filled with 9 years of receipts, signed testimonies, and the final sale contract, I smiled for the first time in months. They had given me a gift after all. 9 years of sacrifice had turned me into something they never expected, patient, calculated. And when the night of the gala came, I would unwrap my revenge. The gala shimmered under chandeliers, silver trays carried by waiters in white gloves, the sound of violins floating through the air. Everyone was dressed to be seen. Politicians, business owners, socialites. And in the center of it all stood my parents, basking in the glow of admiration they had stolen. Mom wore a sequined navy gown, her hair sprayed stiff, her smile wide enough to split her face. Dad had polished his shoes to a mirror shine, raising his glass to anyone who would look his way. Lindsay clung to their side, sparkling in diamonds bought with the money that was supposed to be our home. I walked in quietly. Not a single eye turned to me. They didn't expect me here, not in a thrifted black dress and scuffed shoes, not in the skin of the girl they'd left behind. But I wasn't there to blend in. I was there to strike. I stayed at the back while Dad took the stage. He tapped the microphone, his voice booming through the speakers. Thank you all for coming tonight. Our family is living proof that with resilience, sacrifice, and unity, you can overcome any hardship. The audience applauded. My chest tightened, but I forced myself still. He continued, puffing up with every word. For 9 years, our family carried the weight of a home in danger, but we stood together. We worked hard, and now, thanks to that effort, we are stronger than ever. I almost laughed. We stood together? He hadn't lifted a finger. Mom joined him on stage, her smile dripping with false warmth. We taught our daughters that family comes first, that everything we do is for love. Tonight, we celebrate not just ourselves, but every family that fights for each other. That was my cue. I walked forward, each step steady, my folder clutched like a weapon. A few heads turned, whispers began. My parents froze the moment they saw me. Dad's smile faltered. Mom's hand tightened on the microphone. Lindsay's eyes widened in horror. Emma, Dad hissed into the mic, trying to laugh it off. What are you doing here? This isn't... I climbed the steps onto the stage and snatched the microphone from him. My voice shook for only a second before steel filled it. You want to talk about sacrifice? Let's talk. The room fell silent. Every gaze locked onto me. For 9 years, I began. I paid every cent of the debt on the house we lived in. 9 years of double shifts, eating scraps, bleeding myself dry while these 3 lived like royalty. My mother bought perfume worth more than my rent. My father gambled. My sister paraded diamonds. And me? I was the mule carrying it all. Gasps rippled through the audience. My parents shifted, their faces cracking. But here's the real truth. I held up the sale contract, my voice rising. The day I made the last payment, the very next morning, they sold the house. They left me with nothing. They stole the only thing I worked for, the only piece of my life I had bled for. I slammed the contract onto the podium. And then they came here tonight to call it unity. The crowd erupted, shocked whispers, heads shaking, people leaning forward to see the papers. Mom lunged toward me, her smile gone, her face twisted. She's lying. She's always been dramatic, always twisting things. But I was ready. I pulled out the folder, spilling the receipts across the podium. 9 years of payments in my name, testimonies signed by neighbors, the ambulance report from the night they had tried to let me die. Lies? I spat, meeting her eyes. These papers are my scars, and you can't hide them. The room turned. A man in the front row muttered loudly, They're frauds. A woman shook her head. Stealing from your own daughter? Monsters. Dad tried to grab the mic back. You don't understand. I yanked it away. My voice cut through like glass. You left me in fields. You left me gasping in ambulances. You left me starving in my own home. And you thought I'd never fight back. But here I am. And here's your real gift, the truth, in front of everyone you care about. Silence slammed into the room. Then, like dominoes, people began to rise, disgust etched into their faces. A businessman who had been shaking Dad's hand moments earlier walked out. A woman who had embraced Mom turned her back. The humiliation spread like wildfire. My parents stood frozen, stripped of the image they worshipped, their pride crumbling under the weight of their own cruelty. And me? I didn't need applause. I didn't need pity. I only needed this moment. I gathered the scattered papers, tucked them under my arm, and walked down the stage. Lindsay called after me, her voice breaking, but I didn't stop. I didn't look back. Outside, the night was cool, the stars sharp against the sky. I stood there alone, but not broken. For the first time in 9 years, I wasn't carrying their weight anymore. They were the ones left with the burden now, the burden of their shame, their downfall, their rotting reputation. And I knew, as I walked away, that they would never escape it. Please subscribe to our channel and tell us in comments from where are you watching this video.